The morning sun was only beginning to climb over the rooftops of Maple Street when the quiet calm of Wichita shattered. Sirens sliced through the suburban stillness, echoing between neat rows of houses, each painted in soft pastels and framed by picket fences. What had once been a peaceful Saturday morning now looked like the edge of a nightmare. Clara Jensen stood barefoot on her lawn, her faded robe clinging to her frame, her face pale under the soft wash of amber light. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, locked not on the chaos of police officers swarming her neighbor's yard, but on the dog sitting motionless near the fence line. The German shepherd was massive, his chest broad, his coat gleaming under the sunlight. The K9 unit's badge shone from his collar. Ranger. Clara couldn't breathe. Her heart pounded in her throat as her gaze fixed on the animal's eyes, calm, amber, intelligent. The same eyes she used to wake up to every morning when he'd curl up at the foot of the bed beside her fiancé, Luke. But that was impossible. Ranger had died 2 years ago. "Ma'am, you need to step back," said Officer Harper, a young patrolman whose nerves were written all over his face. He gestured for her to move away from the yellow tape, but Clara didn't seem to hear him. Her lips parted slightly, her breathing shallow. The officer tried again. "Miss, you're too close to the scene. Please, can you?" She turned toward him slowly, her eyes still distant. "He knows," she whispered. Harper blinked. "What was that?" She took a step forward, her gaze flicking toward Ranger. "He knows what happened." The K9 handler, a tall man in tactical gear named Sergeant Dwyer, shot Harper a puzzled glance. He crouched next to his dog. "What's she talking about?" Ranger sat perfectly still, ears twitching, eyes locked on Clara as if waiting for something. The handler tugged on his leash. The dog didn't move. Not a single muscle. Clara could feel tears building behind her eyes. The smell of fresh-cut grass mixed with gasoline and the faint metallic tang of fear that hung in the air. She felt the ground tilt slightly beneath her, the way it had 2 years ago when she'd stood outside a hospital room door, waiting to be told Luke was gone. She could still remember the way Ranger had howled that night, his cry echoing through the police station's hallway. Now that same dog sat only a few feet away, looking at her as though no time had passed. "Ma'am," Sergeant Dwyer said cautiously, "do you know this dog?" Clara's lips trembled. "Yes," she said, barely above a whisper. "He used to be mine." Dwyer frowned. "That can't be right. Ranger's been with me for 3 years. We transferred from Kansas City after Officer Luke Mercer was killed." She interrupted, her voice trembling but steadying with each word. "He was my fiancé." Dwyer's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. He looked down at Ranger, who had now shifted slightly closer to the fence, eyes softening, tail still. "Luke," Clara's voice cracked. "He was the one who trained him. Ranger wouldn't forget me. He can't." Behind them, another officer called out, "We found something." The sound snapped everyone's attention toward the small house across the street. An older man, Mr. Watkins, had been discovered unconscious inside his living room. Paramedics were rushing in and out, while neighbors whispered on porches, clutching coffee mugs like shields. Harper looked back at Clara. "Ma'am, did you see or hear anything last night? Anyone near your house? The suspect might have passed through your yard." Clara hesitated. Her mind felt foggy, her thoughts slipping like water through her fingers. "I heard something," she admitted. "Around midnight. I thought it was just the wind." Dwyer nodded. "We'll check your property, just to be safe." As the officers spread out, Clara's gaze lingered on Ranger. He tilted his head again, watching her intently. The dog took a cautious step forward until the leash went taut. His handler murmured something under his breath, but Ranger didn't respond. For a long moment, everything else fell away. The radios crackling, the shouting officers, the rumble of engines. It was just Clara and Ranger, bound by a thread of something invisible but unbreakable. "Why are you here?" she whispered. "Why now?" Ranger's tail flicked once, a quiet movement, almost like acknowledgement. And that's when she saw it, a faint smudge on his front paw. Mud, darker than the rest, mixed with something reddish-brown. Her stomach tightened. She knew that color. She had seen it too many times when Luke came home after a long night shift. Blood. Her hand flew to her mouth. Sergeant Dwyer noticed her expression. "Ma'am, you all right?" Clara nodded automatically, but her mind was already racing. "He came from there," she said, pointing toward the narrow alley between her house and Mr. Watkins. "That's where he found the scent." Dwyer blinked, taken aback. "How did you?" "Because that's where Luke used to start his training runs with him," she said softly. "Every time they went on a search?" The sergeant stared at her, then at Ranger, who had begun to pace slightly, nose twitching, gaze darting between the two houses. Something in Dwyer's posture shifted, a hesitation, a flicker of doubt. Ranger stopped abruptly and barked once, sharp and loud, the sound echoing down the street. Every officer turned. The dog's gaze shot toward the tree line beyond the houses, the small patch of woods that bordered the neighborhood. Dwyer muttered, "What the hell's gotten into him?" Clara's heartbeat thundered in her ears. "He's telling you something," she said. Before anyone could respond, Ranger lunged forward, straining against the leash. Dwyer struggled to hold him back. "Easy, Ranger, easy." The dog barked again, this time more insistent, digging at the ground near the fence. His nails scraped against the dirt until something small glinted in the grass, a torn piece of black fabric. Harper crouched and picked it up with gloved hands. "Looks like part of a glove," he said. "Or a mask," Dwyer added quietly. Clara's knees weakened. She could barely stand. "You see?" she whispered. "He knows." Her words hung in the air like smoke. Dwyer exchanged a glance with Harper, uncertain. The sergeant finally called out, "Detective McAdams is on his way. He'll want to talk to her." Clara didn't move. Her eyes remained on Ranger, who had stopped digging and now sat still again, breathing heavily, gaze never leaving her face. In that moment, it felt as if the entire street had gone silent, the hum of police radios fading, the neighbors' whispers vanishing. Only the dog's steady breathing filled the air between them, a living reminder of everything she had lost, and everything that might still be waiting to be uncovered. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, trying to still her shaking hands. She could feel the weight of every eye on her, yet the only gaze that mattered was the one watching her from across the fence, loyal, knowing, and impossibly familiar. Somewhere deep inside, she felt it again, that quiet, dreadful certainty. Ranger hadn't come back by accident, and whatever he knew wasn't over yet. The night before the sirens, before the yellow tape and flashing blue lights, the world on Maple Street was still. The air hung heavy with the sweetness of freshly cut grass and the faint hum of sprinklers ticking rhythmically in nearby lawns. For most, it was a peaceful Friday evening, the kind that made suburban Kansas feel almost too safe. For Clara Jensen, it was just another long, lonely night. She'd clocked out late from her shift at Miller's Diner, the one off Highway 54, with the flickering neon sign that never quite worked. The manager had asked her to cover for a no-show waitress, and though her feet ached, she hadn't said no. She never said no these days. Work was the only thing keeping her from thinking too much. By the time she pulled into her driveway, the clock on her dashboard read 11:37 p.m. Her headlights swept across the small white house, the one she and Luke had picked out together 3 years ago. before his badge number became just a line in a folded newspaper. Inside, the house was dim. Her cat, Mittens, greeted her with a low meow and brushed against her legs as she set her keys down. "Hey, you," she murmured, bending to scratch behind his ears. "You hungry?" The sound of kibble hitting the bowl filled the silence. She kicked off her shoes, hung her purse, and went straight to the kitchen window. Her nightly ritual, 1 cup of chamomile tea, staring out into the darkness that stretched beyond her backyard fence. It wasn't total darkness, not really. A soft glow came from Mr. Watkins' house 2 doors down, his porch light always on. He was the kind of neighbor who checked his mail twice a day and waved to everyone, even the teenagers who ignored him. He'd lost his wife 2 winters ago, and though they weren't close, he always smiled when he saw Clara walking to her car. Tonight, though, something felt off. The light in his window flickered twice, then went out. Clara frowned. "That's strange," she whispered. She sipped her tea, watching, waiting. Nothing moved. The street was quiet, save for the distant buzz of a TV through someone's open window. She turned away, trying to shake the unease. Maybe the bulb finally burned out, she thought. Mr. Watkins was always forgetting to replace things. By midnight, she was curled on the couch with a blanket and her phone, scrolling aimlessly through social media. Photos of smiling couples, friends out at bars, and happy families scrolled past, each one a reminder of the life she used to have. Her thumb froze over a post she hadn't seen before, an old memory that had resurfaced in her feed. Luke, grinning in uniform, one arm around Ranger. The caption she'd written 2 years ago glowed in her dim living room. "The best partners never let you walk alone." Her throat tightened. She shut off the phone. That's when she heard it, a soft, metallic sound from outside. Her head jerked up. The clock on the wall read 12:16 a.m., another sound. The faint creak of metal against wood. Clara rose slowly, every nerve on edge. The sound was coming from the back door, the one that opened onto her small porch, and the yard that backed onto the trees. She moved closer, heart hammering. Mittens hissed suddenly, tail puffed. Clara whispered, though her voice trembled. She reached for her phone on the coffee table, her thumb hovering over the screen to call 911. The doorknob rattled, once, twice. She froze. Her mind raced. Should she call? Should she move? Should she shout? But before she could decide, the noise stopped. The silence that followed was unbearable. She waited, listening. The only sound was her own heartbeat and the faint buzz of the refrigerator. After a long moment, she gathered enough courage to peer through the small window above the sink. At first, she saw nothing, just her own reflection staring back, pale and ghost-like. Then, from the corner of her vision, movement. A shadow. Someone or something was standing near her tool shed, half hidden by the trees. Clara's breath hitched. Her hand pressed against the cold glass. The figure didn't move, just stood there, facing her direction. Her phone slipped slightly in her sweaty hand. "Who's there?" She called out, voice breaking halfway. No response. Her pulse roared in her ears. She backed away from the window slowly, eyes never leaving the yard. "This isn't happening," she whispered to herself. "You're tired. You're seeing things." The shadow shifted and disappeared into the tree line. Clara stumbled backward, bumping into the kitchen table. Her tea mug fell and shattered on the floor. The sound snapped something in her. She grabbed her phone, rushed to the hallway, and turned on every light she could reach. The cat bolted under the couch. Clara tried dialing 911, but stopped herself halfway through. What would she say? That she saw a shape in the dark? The last time she'd called the police for something like that. 6 months ago, they'd sent an officer who'd recognized her name and said gently, "It's probably just your nerves, ma'am." Her grief had made her a ghost in her own home, the woman everyone pitied, but no one truly believed. So she didn't call. She sat on the couch, phone clutched in her hand, eyes locked on the back door until sunrise. At some point, exhaustion won. Her head drooped against the pillow, the pale light of dawn bleeding through the curtains. When she woke, the house was bright again. The world outside seemed calm, almost normal. The shadows of night had retreated, leaving behind only the faint echo of fear. But when she stepped onto her porch to breathe in the morning air, she saw them, footprints. Deep, muddy prints, leading from the fence to the shed. And something else. Near the porch steps, a torn glove, black, leather, and slick with moisture. Clara's breath caught. She knelt, touching it carefully. It was cold. Too cold. She turned it over, and for just a second, she thought she saw letters written faintly on the inside, like initials rubbed into the lining. LM. Her heart stopped. She knew those letters. Luke Mercer. Her fiancé. The glove slipped from her hand, falling onto the grass. A voice called from somewhere down the street, sharp, panicked. She looked up. 2 houses away, people were gathering on Mr. Watkins' lawn. A police car screeched to a stop. Another followed. Clara's pulse quickened. She rose slowly, her mind spinning. Footprints, shadows, a torn glove marked with Luke's initials, and now police sirens, slicing through the same morning stillness that had felt so safe an hour ago. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She ran barefoot across the lawn, through the dewy grass, until she reached the gathering crowd. Officers pushed the bystanders back. Everyone stayed behind the line. Clara caught sight of the stretcher being wheeled out from the house. Mr. Watkins, motionless, oxygen mask over his face. Her stomach dropped. "Ma'am, you can't be here," a uniformed officer told her. Clara barely heard him. Her eyes drifted to the side yard, where a German shepherd stood beside his handler, steady, alert, waiting for command. The name on the dog's collar caught the light. Ranger. Her world tilted. The sound of her heartbeat drowned everything else. 2 years gone, buried beside Luke. Yet here he was, alive, watching her. And in that instant, she knew deep down, whatever happened to Mr. Watkins, whatever shadow had moved through her yard last night, Ranger already knew the truth. And he had come back to show her. The morning on Maple Street was no longer quiet. Yellow tape fluttered like warning flags in the cool spring breeze, and the hum of police radios filled the air. Neighbors whispered in clusters, clutching coffee mugs and bathrobes, trying to piece together what had happened. But Clara Jensen stood alone at the edge of her lawn, wrapped in silence. The scent of wet grass and engine exhaust mixed in the air. Her eyes were fixed on one thing, the German shepherd sitting obediently beside his handler. Ranger. He looked exactly as she remembered, his thick black and tan coat, his steady eyes that seemed to see more than anyone else ever could. The same dog she thought she had buried 2 years ago. The sight of him twisted something deep inside her. It felt impossible, surreal, like a memory that refused to stay dead. "Ma'am, I need you to stay back behind the tape, please," said a young officer, stepping in front of her. His tone was polite but firm. Clara nodded faintly, though she barely heard him. Her gaze stayed locked on Ranger. The dog had turned his head slightly toward her, one ear perked. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, or maybe she imagined it. He took one step forward, pulling against the leash. His handler, Sergeant Dwyer, frowned and gave a low command. "Ranger, heel." The dog didn't listen. Instead, he barked once, sharp, deliberate. Every officer on the scene paused. Dwyer tightened his grip. "Ranger, sit." The shepherd froze, but kept his eyes fixed on Clara. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. It was as if the entire block was holding its breath. Then the radio crackled. "We've got the victim loaded," someone said. "Watkins is still unconscious but stable. EMS says blunt force trauma, possible head injury." Clara's heart dropped. Mr. Watkins, the quiet old man who waved to her every morning. She thought of his porch light flickering out the night before. Had she seen the last moment he was conscious? An older detective approached from the house, a tall man in his 40s with lines etched deep into his brow. His badge caught the light as he walked up to Sergeant Dwyer. "What have we got?" he asked. Dwyer gestured toward the fence. "Dog picked up a trail, sir. It ends right around here." "Near her yard?" the detective asked, glancing at Clara. "Yes, sir," Dwyer confirmed. "And Ranger's acting strange. Keeps looking at her." The detective's eyes followed the line of Dwyer's gesture. He studied Clara, disheveled, pale, barefoot on the grass. "You live next door?" Clara nodded slowly. "2 houses down." He introduced himself. "Detective Evan McAdams, Wichita PD." His voice carried calm authority, the kind that came from years of seeing too much. "You said you saw something last night?" Clara hesitated. The words caught in her throat. I heard something. Around midnight. My back door handle. It moved. Someone was out there." McAdams exchanged a look with Dwyer. "You didn't call it in?" "No," she said quietly. "I thought maybe it was just an animal." Ranger let out a low whine, a sound that made Dwyer stiffen. McAdams crouched near the fence, studying the ground. "There are footprints," he said. "Looks like someone hopped between yards." He pointed toward the soft dirt near Clara's fence line. Clear impressions leading toward the woods. Dwyer's voice dropped. "That's where Ranger stopped tracking." Clara moved closer, her voice trembling. "He knows where they went." McAdams looked up at her, brow furrowed. "Excuse me?" Clara swallowed hard. "Ranger. He's done this before. He doesn't stop unless he recognizes the scent." The detective's eyes narrowed slightly, curious. "You seem to know a lot about canine training, Miss Jensen." Her gaze flicked toward the dog again. "I used to live with one." Dwyer's head turned sharply. "What do you mean?" Her lips trembled. "That dog. He used to belong to my fiancé, Officer Luke Mercer." The name landed like a heavy stone. Even the hum of police chatter seemed to dim for a moment. McAdams straightened slowly. He knew that name. Everyone on the force did. Luke Mercer, the young officer killed in an ambush 2 years earlier during a botched drug raid. His death had hit the department hard. "You are engaged to Mercer?" McAdams asked carefully. Clara nodded. "We were supposed to get married that fall." "And Ranger was his K-9? "Yes," she said. "They were partners for 3 years." Her voice cracked slightly. "They saved each other more times than I can count." McAdams studied her face, then the dog again. Ranger's calm demeanor had changed. His tail was still, his body tense, eyes flicking between the detective and Clara. "Dwyer," McAdams said quietly, "take Ranger around again. See if he reacts near the backyards." Dwyer nodded and gave a short whistle. Ranger turned, but his gaze lingered on Clara for a long moment before he obeyed. As the dog trotted away, McAdams spoke gently. "You said you heard something last night. Did you notice anything unusual before that? Anyone on the street? Cars?" Clara rubbed her arms, trying to shake the chill that had settled in. "No cars, just something by the tool shed. I saw a shadow." "A shadow?" "Yes," she said. "I thought it was my imagination." But when I went outside this morning, there were footprints and a glove. McAdams' attention sharpened. A glove? She nodded. Black leather. Torn. I left it by the porch. Show me, he said. They crossed the yard together. Clara's steps were hesitant. The grass was damp under her feet. She pointed toward the porch steps. The glove lay there, half buried in the dirt, glistening faintly in the sunlight. McAdams crouched to examine it. You didn't touch it? I picked it up once, she admitted. Just for a second. He sighed softly, pulling on latex gloves before lifting it into a clear evidence bag. Next time, don't touch anything, all right? I didn't know, she said, her voice small. He studied her face, tired eyes, pale lips, grief layered with confusion. There was something fragile about her, but also something resolute. She wasn't hysterical or rambling. She was grounded, haunted, but sharp. Ma'am, he said carefully, this glove, it could belong to whoever broke into your neighbor's house. We'll run prints. Clara hesitated. There were letters inside, she whispered. McAdams looked up. Letters? Initials, she said softly. LM. For a moment, he didn't move. His gaze held hers, searching. Luke Mercer? He asked finally. Her throat tightened. It's impossible. But yes. McAdams exhaled, long and heavy. Could have been old. Could have belonged to him before the reassignment. She shook her head. No. He lost that glove the week before he died. I remember. We looked for it everywhere. The detective's expression hardened. Then it shouldn't be here. He sealed the bag, his mind already spinning. Before he could say more, Dwyer's radio crackled again. Sir, you need to see this. They turned toward the fence. Dwyer stood there with Ranger, the dog's nose pressed against the ground. What is it? McAdams called. Dwyer pointed toward a patch of dirt behind the fence line. A faint, dark stain marked the grass, something that didn't look like mud. Ranger barked once, then sat, rigid, alert, staring straight toward the woods. McAdams knelt, brushing the grass aside. Blood, he muttered. Not much, but fresh. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. The detective stood slowly, his eyes scanning the tree line. Whoever was here didn't get far. Ranger whined, pacing slightly, tail low. McAdams glanced back at Clara. We're going to need your statement. And we'll want you to stay somewhere else tonight, just in case. Her voice barely held steady. You think they'll come back? He didn't answer right away. If they think you saw something, maybe. As he turned toward his car, Ranger looked back at her once more. Their eyes met, and in that instant, she felt a flicker of the past come alive again. Luke used to say the dog could sense truth. He doesn't just track scent, Luke had told her once. He tracks guilt. Now, as Ranger sat still in the morning light, his gaze said everything words couldn't. Something or someone familiar had been here last night. And Ranger wasn't just chasing a criminal. He was following the ghosts of a story that hadn't ended 2 years ago. Detective Evan McAdams didn't sleep that night. The case file sat open across his desk, its contents spread like puzzle pieces, photos, witness statements, the evidence bag containing the glove with the faded LM initials. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, throwing a pale glow over the papers. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the glove. The leather was cracked with age, but the initials were unmistakable. He had seen Luke Mercer's K-9 reports before, and that exact marking had been documented in his gear inventory. McAdams ran a hand over his jaw, exhaling. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. Across the precinct, the hum of printers and ringing phones had faded. Midnight was creeping in, and most of the department had gone home. Only the faint sound of Ranger's claws tapping the linoleum echoed from the hallway. The dog had refused to stay in his kennel, restless all evening. Sergeant Dwyer appeared at the door, a coffee in each hand. "You're still here." McAdams gestured toward the mess on his desk. "Tell me this doesn't look wrong." Dwyer stepped closer, setting the coffee down. "I already ran the glove prints through the database. We got one partial, but not enough for ID. And get this, no trace of Luke Mercer's DNA. None." McAdams frowned. "So someone planted it. That's what it looks like." Dwyer hesitated. "You think the widow's involved?" "She's not a widow," McAdams said quietly. "They weren't married." Dwyer shrugged. "Still, she's in the middle of everything. Ranger reacts to her like she's in old command. Maybe she's hiding something." McAdams stared at the crime scene photo of Clara's backyard. "Or maybe someone wants us to think she is." He rose from his chair, grabbing his coat. "Come on. Let's pay her another visit before dawn." Scene 2. Clara's house, 3:14 a.m. The knock at the door jolted Clara awake. She sat up, heart hammering. The night was thick with silence. Only the low hum of the refrigerator broke it. She hesitated, glancing at the clock. 3:14 a.m. No one decent knocked at that hour. Another knock, firmer this time. "Ms. Jensen, it's Detective McAdams." Her breath left her chest in a shaky sigh. She unlocked the door, opening it halfway. "You scared me." "Sorry," he said. His tone was softer than usual. "We need to ask a few more questions. Mind if we come in?" She nodded reluctantly. Ranger followed them in, his nails clicking softly on the wooden floor. The moment his paws touched the threshold, he froze. His ears flicked forward, nose twitching. "What is it?" Clara whispered. Ranger padded down the hallway, sniffing near the baseboards. He stopped at a closed door, the small office that had once belonged to Luke. McAdams exchanged a look with Dwyer. "What's in there?" Clara's face tightened. "Just storage. I haven't been in there since—" She trailed off. Ranger barked once, low and sharp. McAdams stepped forward. "Ma'am, we're going to need to check." Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead." The detective opened the door slowly. The smell of dust and paper hit immediately, stale air from a room untouched for years. Luke's things were still there, the neatly folded uniform, an old canine photo frame, the corner desk stacked with police reports and field manuals. McAdams moved the flashlight beam across the shelves. Everything seemed ordinary until the light caught something faint on the windowsill. A smudge. He leaned closer. It wasn't dust. It was a handprint. Fresh. "Dwyer?" he said quietly. "Get a print kit." Clara covered her mouth. "That can't be possible. I keep that door locked. You didn't notice it open?" McAdams asked. She shook her head. "No, I only open it on Luke's birthday." Dwyer crouched near the window, examining the sill. Prints too large for her. Whoever was here came in from outside. McAdams followed the line of the smudge to the window latch. It was slightly bent, forced open. "How long have you lived alone?" he asked, still scanning the room. 2 years, she said quietly. "Since Luke. Anyone else have a key?" "No one." Ranger's low growl rolled through the room. His tail was stiff, body tense, gaze fixed on the closet door. McAdams's hand instinctively went to his gun. "Stay here," he said to Clara. He motioned to Dwyer, who reached for the handle. The closet creaked open. Inside, nothing. Just uniforms, boxes, and a faint trace of cigarette smoke that shouldn't have been there. Dwyer frowned. "You smell that?" McAdams nodded slowly. "Luke Mercer didn't smoke." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. Then whose smell is it? The detective looked around again. The unease in the room was heavy, almost tangible. Ranger stepped closer to the closet, sniffing, then whimpered softly. McAdams pulled out a small notebook from one of the boxes. Luke's handwriting across the cover. Case notes, Ridgeway incident. He flipped it open. The pages were half burned, edges singed, as if someone had tried to destroy it. "What's Ridgeway?" he asked. Clara frowned. That was the raid. The one where he died. McAdams scanned the line written in pencil. Something off about the informant, not telling the full story. He turned the page, more fragments, more warnings. One stood out in underlined ink. If something happens to me, it won't be random. He looked up sharply. "You've never seen this before?" Clara shook her head. "I thought all his notes were destroyed in the fire." McAdams exhaled. Whoever broke in tonight wasn't after money or electronics. They were looking for this. Ranger growled again, deeper this time. He was staring at the half-open window. Outside, a car engine rumbled in the distance, then faded into silence. McAdams moved to the curtain, peering out. The street was empty. Still, his instincts prickled. "Pack a bag," he said suddenly. "You're not staying here tonight." Clara looked startled. "Where am I supposed to go?" "There's a motel off Highway 92, he said. "It's quiet off the radar. I'll have a unit check in every hour." She hesitated, glancing at Ranger. "Can he stay?" The detective looked at Dwyer. Ranger was already sitting by her side, tail wagging faintly, eyes fixed on her like he had chosen. McAdams gave a small nod. "For tonight, he's yours." Scene 3. The motel. 4:47 a.m. The hum of the neon sign outside flickered through the blinds, painting Clara's face in alternating red and white. Ranger lay by the door, his breathing steady, his head resting on his paws. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, staring at Luke's old notebook. The smell of dust and faint smoke still clung to it. She traced her fingers over the handwriting, the curves and slants she knew by heart. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You should have left it locked." Her pulse froze. She stared at the screen, then looked toward Ranger. The dog's ears lifted instantly. A low growl rumbled in his throat. She whispered, "Someone's watching us." Ranger stood, body tense, facing the window. Clara crawled to the floor, peeking through the blinds. Across the street, a dark sedan idled near the gas station, its headlights off. Her phone buzzed again. "He told you not to dig." She dropped the phone, heart racing. At that moment, the motel door handle twitched. Ranger lunged, barking violently. Clara stumbled back, fumbling for her phone. She dialed McAdams with shaking hands. He picked up instantly. "Clara? Someone's outside my room." "I'm on my way." "Stay inside, lock the door." Ranger growled louder, pacing near the door. Then, silence. The handle stopped moving. Outside, the car engine roared to life and sped away. Minutes later, flashing red and blue lights filled the parking lot. McAdams burst through the door with 2 officers. Clara was on the floor, clutching the notebook. Ranger stood guard, still tense. McAdams knelt beside her. "You did good. You're safe now." She shook her head. "No, Detective. Whoever that was, they knew about Luke, about what he found." McAdams took the notebook from her hands, flipping through the burned pages once more. One note at the back caught his eye, written hastily, almost illegible. The truth's in the dog's eyes. He saw everything. He stared at Ranger. The dog met his gaze, calm, steady, unblinking. "Then maybe," McAdams said softly, It's time we start listening to him. Rain lashed against the police station's windows as Detective Evan McAdams hunched over the glowing screen in the dim conference room. The footage from Mr. Watkins' security camera had just finished rendering, each frame revealing another piece of the puzzle it refused to fit. Clara sat quietly beside him, her hands clasped, eyes tired but alert. Ranger the K-9 rested at her feet, head on his paws, his tail twitching slightly whenever the image flickered. The time stamp read 2:03 a.m. A figure appeared hooded, moving carefully between the hedges. McAdams paused, leaning closer. "Bear," he muttered. "Pause it. Zoom." The grainy image expanded, showing the man's build tall, lean, cautious. The hood concealed most of his face, but something in his movement, in the subtle hesitance of each step, made Clara's heart tighten. "You've seen him before," McAdams said softly, noticing her expression. Her throat went dry. "Yes, but not in a long time." The next second, a motion sensor light flared from a nearby porch, flooding the screen with glare. When the shadow reappeared, it wasn't alone. Another shape, a faint reflection, almost ghost-like, appeared in the window of the house behind him. McAdams frowned. "There's someone else there. Maybe a lookout?" But Clara leaned forward, squinting, her pulse drumming in her ears. "No," she whispered. "That's not a lookout. That's Daniel Mercer." McAdams' head snapped toward her. "Daniel Mercer, Luke's brother?" She nodded, voice trembling. "He disappeared after the funeral. No one's seen him since." McAdams leaned back, processing. The revelation changed everything. Daniel Mercer had once been a respected police officer himself, until he'd accused the department of mishandling Luke's case. He'd walked away bitter, broken, and obsessed with uncovering the truth behind his brother's death. And now, apparently, he was back. "Clara," McAdams said carefully, "if that's Daniel, what would he be doing near the Watkins property in the middle of the night?" She hesitated. "I don't know. But if he's come back, he's not here for theft." McAdams studied her. "Then what is he here for?" The room was silent, except for the hum of the old computer fan. Ranger suddenly lifted his head, ears perked. His gaze locked on the screen, on the frozen image of Daniel Mercer's shadow. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Clara placed a hand on the dog's neck, soothing him. "It's okay," she whispered. "You remember him too, don't you?" Ranger's eyes didn't leave the screen. The detective exhaled slowly and replayed the footage from a different angle. This time, the camera caught a fleeting glimmer, something metallic, reflecting the porch light as Daniel moved. McAdams paused it again, adjusting the contrast. "What is that?" he murmured. "A weapon?" Clara leaned closer. Her stomach dropped. "No, that's Luke's badge." McAdams looked at her sharply. "Impossible. The department logged all of Mercer's belongings after his death." But Clara shook her head. "Not everything. Luke kept a duplicate of his badge for a private investigation. He said, if something happened to him, that badge would lead to the truth." The detective's expression darkened. "Then Daniel must have found it." The room filled with quiet urgency. Clara's mind spun. Daniel had been right all along. Luke's death wasn't random. But if he had Luke's badge now, what was he planning? Hours later, McAdams and Clara drove through the slick streets of Wichita, the storm easing into a drizzle. The patrol car's headlights sliced through mist as they neared the neighborhood again. Ranger sat upright in the back seat, eyes fixed out the window. They stopped at Mr. Watkins' property. The crime scene tape flapped lightly in the wind. The faint smell of rain and cut grass mixed with something metallic blood, faint but unmistakable. McAdams crouched near the fence, flashlight sweeping over the ground. "Here," he said, pointing. "Boot prints. 2 different sets. Clara joined him, shivering slightly in the damp night air. Daniel wasn't alone, she murmured. McAdams nodded grimly. Looks like it. The second pair could belong to whoever he's running from. Ranger moved closer, nose to the ground. His tail stiffened, muscles tensing. Without warning, he broke from McAdams' grip and padded toward the corner of Clara's backyard. He stopped beside the fence, the same spot he'd fixated on before, and began pawing at the soil. "Ranger, heel," McAdams ordered, but Clara shook her head. "No, wait. Let him." The dog continued digging until his paw hit something hard. McAdams knelt, clearing away dirt with his hands until he uncovered a small, mud-caked tin box about the size of a paperback. It was old, rusted, and dented, but sealed tight. He glanced at Clara. "You ever seen this before?" She shook her head slowly. "No. But Luke used to keep something just like that in the trunk of his car." McAdams stood, holding the box up to the beam of his flashlight. Stamped faintly across the top were 3 letters. LM, the air between them thickened. "Luke Mercer," McAdams murmured. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God." He turned to her. "This isn't random. Ranger didn't just lead us here. He's protecting what's left of Luke's case." Back at the precinct, the evidence team carefully pried open the tin box. Inside were damp papers, field notes, photos, scribbled maps, and a small flash drive wrapped in plastic. Every page was marked in Luke's handwriting. The smell of earth clung to the papers, as though time itself had been waiting for this moment. McAdams held one of the documents up to the light. "This looks like surveillance notes," he said. "Drug movements, internal routes, even badge numbers." Clara's eyes widened. He was tracking someone in the department. They exchanged a tense look. McAdams scrolled through the images on the flash drive, heart pounding. Photos of police evidence lockers, vehicle tags, meetings in parking lots at night. A pattern emerged, each linked to confiscated narcotics that had never made it to the official reports. "Jesus," he muttered. Luke was investigating a dirty cop. Clara felt the room sway. Everything Luke had warned her about the late nights, the paranoia, the quiet fear he carried, suddenly made sense. He hadn't been obsessed. He'd been right. McAdams rubbed his face. This could blow the department apart. She stared at the photos, then at Ranger, lying by the door, watchful and silent. "He knew," she whispered. "He must have known someone was after him." As dawn broke over the city, Clara stood in the empty hallway outside McAdams' office, her reflection staring back from the glass. For the first time in 2 years, she felt something stir inside her chest: clarity, purpose, and a terrifying sense of truth just out of reach. McAdams stepped out, holding the flash drive. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "But if Daniel has the other half of this, we need to find him before someone else does." Clara nodded, her expression firm. "We will. And when we do, Luke finally gets justice." Ranger's tail thumped once against the floor, as if agreeing. That morning, McAdams called in a small task force. They began tracing Daniel Mercer's last known contacts, an old motel registration, a pawn shop security camera, and a string of late-night cash withdrawals under a fake name. The pieces aligned toward the outskirts of town, a derelict warehouse near the river, the same area Luke had once staked out before his death. By the time they gathered their gear, the storm had passed. The sun broke through the clouds in fractured light, glinting off puddles like scattered glass. Clara stood by the car, watching Ranger sniff the air, tail wagging once before settling into stillness. McAdams joined her. "You ready?" She took a deep breath. "I've been ready for 2 years." The detective nodded. Then let's finish what he started. Ranger barked once, sharp and sure, before leaping into the back seat. The truth was close now, close enough to taste. And none of them knew that before the night ended, one more secret buried deep inside that flash drive would change the meaning of everything they thought they knew about Luke Mercer's death. The warehouse sat like a skeleton against the early dusk, its windows cracked and ribs of rusted steel cutting through the gray Kansas sky. The hum of the city faded here, replaced by the steady drip of rain and the faint creak of old metal swaying in the wind. Detective McAdams cut the headlights, coasting the unmarked sedan to a stop behind a row of abandoned freight containers. Clara sat in the passenger seat, hands clenched, eyes fixed on the hollow structure ahead. Ranger whined softly in the back seat, his nose pressed to the glass, tail stiff. McAdams checked his radio. "Unit 3 to command. We're in position," he said quietly. "Possible visual on Daniel Mercer's vehicle." Static crackled, then a voice replied, "Copy that. Proceed with caution." He looked at Clara. "You stay behind me at all times, understood? If Daniel's here, he might be armed. We'll talk first, but be ready for anything." Clara nodded. "He's not dangerous, Detective. Just desperate. That's what worries me." He opened his door, and cold air rushed in. The wind carried a damp chill, but beneath it, the faint scent of gasoline and something else. Fear. They moved silently through the side entrance, flashlights cutting thin beams through the dark. Inside, puddles of rainwater rippled beneath their boots. The walls were lined with old crates, rotting tarps, and graffiti faded by time. Ranger padded ahead, nose twitching, every muscle alert. He stopped suddenly, ears erect, and growled, low, deliberate. McAdams raised his flashlight, catching movement near the far end of the warehouse. A shadow flinched, ducking behind a support beam. "Daniel Mercer," McAdams called out, voice firm but calm. "This is Detective McAdams, Wichita PD. We just want to talk." For a long moment's silence, then a man's voice echoed back, trembling, raw. "Don't come any closer." Clara's heart skipped. She recognized it instantly. "Daniel," she called, stepping forward before McAdams could stop her. "It's me, Clara." A figure stepped into the half-light. Daniel Mercer looked nothing like the man she remembered from Luke's funeral. His hair was unkempt, his face gaunt, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. He held a small metal box in his hands, the twin to the one they'd found buried near her fence. "Clara," he whispered, voice breaking. "You shouldn't have come." She took a careful step forward. "You think I could stay away? You're out here chasing ghosts, Daniel, but I think you found one that matters." He shook his head. "You don't understand. They're watching. The people who killed Luke, they never stopped watching. I found the proof, but I can't trust anyone." McAdams slowly raised his hands. "You can trust me, Daniel. We have Luke's notes. The flash drive. You were right all along, about everything." Daniel's grip on the box loosened slightly. "Then you know what's on this one, too." McAdams nodded. "Evidence?" Daniel exhaled shakily. "Confessions, names, video files. Luke recorded everything before he died. He gave it to me, told me if anything happened, I'd know where to hide it. But they got to him first." Ranger stepped forward, tail wagging faintly, then stopped a few feet from Daniel. The dog's head tilted, as if recognizing something in the man's scent. Daniel crouched, his expression softening. "Hey, buddy," he murmured. "You still remember me, huh?" For a fleeting second, the tension cracked, replaced by a fragile stillness. Clara felt her throat tighten. Then, the sound of tires screeching outside shattered it. McAdams spun toward the noise. Headlights cut across the broken windows, blinding him momentarily. "Get down," he shouted, pulling Clara behind a stack of crates. Ranger barked furiously. The warehouse doors burst open. Two men in plain clothes, armed, stormed in, their movements sharp, professional. McAdams recognized them immediately. They weren't strangers. They were cops. "Wichita PD," one shouted, flashing a badge. "Step away from the suspect." But McAdams saw the insignia. Internal Affairs, not field officers. And he knew something was wrong. Daniel backed away, clutching the box tighter. "They're not here to arrest me," he shouted. "They're here to bury this." One of the agents raised his weapon. "Drop the box, Mercer, now." McAdams stepped forward. "Hold your fire. He's got evidence. We can bring it in together." "Detective," the taller agent said coldly, "this is above your clearance." The air went still. Clara's pulse thundered in her ears. Ranger growled, fur bristling. Daniel's eyes darted between McAdams, Clara, and the agents. "You see?" he whispered. "It never ends." Luke tried to stop them, and they killed him for it. Clara stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Ben, let's end it tonight." Before anyone could move, one of the agents lunged. The warehouse exploded in chaos. Shouts, movement, the metallic clang of gunfire ricocheting off steel. Clara hit the ground as Ranger leapt toward Daniel, shoving him out of the line of fire. McAdams fired once, disarming the nearest attacker. When the smoke cleared, one of the agents was down, the other fleeing into the rain. Daniel lay on the ground, shaking, clutching the metal box to his chest. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead. McAdams crouched beside him. "It's over," he said. But Daniel shook his head weakly. "No, it's just starting." He handed the box to Clara, eyes glassy. "You have to finish it. Tell them." "Tell them the truth." "Tell who?" Clara asked, voice trembling. Daniel looked at her, his face pale, his voice barely a whisper. "The world." Then his eyes fluttered shut. Hours later, red and blue lights strobed against the warehouse walls. Paramedics loaded Daniel's still form into an ambulance. McAdams stood in the rain, soaked to the bone, his jaw tight. He turned to Clara, who clutched the box to her chest like a sacred thing. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded, though her face was ghost-white. "He died protecting it. Just like Luke." McAdams glanced toward Ranger, who sat silently near the police cruiser, rain dripping from his muzzle. The dog looked at Clara, not in confusion this time, but understanding. "What's in the box, Clara?" McAdams asked softly. She hesitated. "I don't know, but I think Luke wanted me to be the one to open it." Back at the precinct, the storm had passed, leaving the air heavy and still. Clara sat in the evidence room beside McAdams. The box sat on the table between them. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside was a flash drive wrapped in black tape, a folded letter, and Luke's old badge, polished, gleaming despite the years. Clara unfolded the letter, her heart hammering as she read Luke's handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't stop them in time. They're inside the department, not outsiders, our own men. The badge isn't what makes you a cop. What you do when no one's watching does. Daniel knows where the proof is. Trust him. And if Ranger's still with you, follow him. He'll lead you to the rest." Her eyes blurred with tears. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew it would come to this." McAdams plugged in the flash drive. Video files filled the screen, each labeled by date, location, and badge number. The first opened with Luke's voice, recorded from a body cam. Operation Intercept, October 7th. Suspect identified, Officer J. Rowan. Evidence compromised. McAdams froze. "Rowan?" he said. "He's head of narcotics now." Luke's voice continued. "If anything happens to me, tell Clara to trust Ranger. He'll know where to go." Clara stared at the screen, the words echoing through her chest. McAdams turned to her. "Those 2 words you said at the scene. He knows." "You are right. Ranger knew the whole time." She nodded slowly, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Then we follow him to the end." Ranger rose to his feet, ears pricked, as if understanding every word. He padded to the door, looking back once, waiting. Clara stood, tucking Luke's badge into her pocket. "Come on," she whispered. And with that, the 3 of them, the grieving woman, the weary detective, and the loyal dog, stepped into the pale dawn light, walking toward whatever truth still waited to be uncovered. The storm had passed, but the reckoning had just begun. The Wichita Police Department never slept, but that night it felt colder, emptier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Detective Evan McAdams sat alone in his office, the flicker of the monitor painting ghostly shadows across his face. On the screen, the files from Luke Mercer's flash drive were lined up, timestamps, recordings, and body cam footage dating back nearly 3 years. The evidence was explosive. Luke had been building a case against Officer James Rowan, a decorated narcotics detective, now heading the city's anti-drug task force. The files detailed a web of internal thefts, falsified reports, and quiet disappearances of evidence, shipments of confiscated narcotics that had never reached the department vault. But what shook McAdams most was Luke's calm voice narrating the recordings, as though he knew how it would all end. "If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it out. I was right about the leaks, but I underestimated how deep they go. They're not just taking money. They're deciding who lives, who dies, and what stories get buried. If they come for me, they'll come for Daniel next." McAdams leaned back in his chair, the words echoing in his mind. Luke had seen it coming, every betrayal, every lie, and he had still tried to finish what he started. Ranger shifted quietly near the doorway, his steady presence grounding the detective in a moment that otherwise felt like a fever dream. Across the room, Clara Jensen stood by the window, her reflection faint in the glass. The sunrise hadn't yet broken, and the city outside was a stretch of sleeping lights. She looked down at Luke's badge in her hand, cold, weighty, sacred now. "I can't stop hearing his voice," she whispered. "It's like he's still giving orders, still trying to guide us." McAdams rubbed a hand over his face. "He is. Through that flash drive, through Ranger. It's like he left breadcrumbs for us to follow." She turned toward him, eyes glistening. "So what do we do with it?" He hesitated. "We take it to internal affairs, but not through Rowan's channels. He controls too much. I'll need to go straight to the state office in Topeka, quietly." Clara nodded, gripping Luke's badge tighter. "Then we go tonight." McAdams exhaled. "You're not coming with me." "Like hell I'm not," she snapped. "Luke died alone. Daniel died alone. You're not doing this alone, too." For a moment, the detective didn't argue. He saw it in her eyes, that same fierce conviction that Luke must have fallen in love with. "All right," he said finally. "But if we're doing this, we do it smart." Ranger barked once, short and low, as if agreeing. They left Wichita under a gray dawn, the patrol car slicing through the mist-covered highway. The sky hung low, swollen with clouds that refused to break. McAdams drove, eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror. "Rowan will know by now," he muttered. "The moment that warehouse hit the police reports, he'll connect the dots. Daniel's death won't look accidental for long." Clara stared out the window. "He'll come after us, won't he?" McAdams didn't answer, but the silence said enough. Ranger sat upright in the back seat, gaze fixed ahead, calm but alert. The dog had changed since the night of the shooting, quieter, almost human in his awareness. He wasn't just following commands anymore. He was anticipating them. Clara turned slightly. You think he remembers Luke? McAdams smiled faintly. I think he never forgot. They stopped at a small diner off Highway 54, the kind of place where time seemed to stall between coffee refills and the smell of frying bacon. Inside, a flickering TV played muted news segments. McAdams set the flash drive on the table between them like it was a live explosive. Once I hand this over to state investigators, it's out of our hands, he said quietly. But if Rowan's network is as deep as Luke thought, they'll try to intercept us before we get there. Clara traced her finger along the edge of the drive. So we go faster. McAdams smiled at her determination. You really don't scare easy, do you? She looked out the window at the endless stretch of empty highway. I've already lost everything I was afraid of losing. Before he could respond, Ranger growled, low, guttural warning. McAdams followed the dog's gaze to the parking lot. A black SUV had just pulled in, its windows tinted too dark. Move, McAdams ordered. They exited through the back kitchen door as two men in dark jackets stepped into the diner, scanning the room. The waitress barely looked up before they flashed what looked like badges. Outside, McAdams and Clara sprinted for the car. Ranger leapt into the back, barking sharply as the engine roared to life. Tires screamed against gravel as they sped down the service road, the SUV pulling out behind them seconds later. Bullets cracked through the morning air, one shattering the rear window. Clara ducked instinctively. McAdams swerved hard, veering off onto an unmarked dirt path cutting through a cornfield. Hold on, he yelled. The sedan jolted violently over uneven ground, corn stalks slapping against the windshield. Behind them, the SUV struggled to follow. Ranger barked again, pacing, agitated, then suddenly jumped toward the front, pressing his nose to the dashboard, whining. What is it, boy? Clara shouted over the roar. The dog pawed at the glove box. McAdams popped it open. Inside was Luke's old GPS unit, the same model the department had discontinued years ago. The screen flickered to life, coordinates already marked. McAdams frowned. He must have programmed this before he died. Then that's where we're going, Clara said. An hour later, they reached a secluded field outside of El Dorado. Nothing but grassland, a crumbling barn, and silence. The coordinates led them to a section of ground near the base of a windmill. Ranger jumped out of the car, nose to the dirt, tail wagging. Within seconds, he began to dig, furiously. McAdams and Clara exchanged a look, then joined him. Their hands hit something solid. A waterproof military case, caked in soil. When McAdams opened it, his breath caught. Inside were sealed envelopes, each marked with police insignia and internal memos, hundreds of pages of corruption reports, falsified signatures, and wire transfer receipts. And on top, a USB drive identical to the first one. Clara's voice trembled. He didn't just collect evidence. He duplicated it. McAdams nodded slowly. Luke knew he'd never get a fair shot inside the system. So he buried it, literally. He looked toward the horizon. And now, we're the only ones who know where it is. They drove back into Wichita, under a rising sun streaked with gold. The city was waiting, oblivious to the storm about to hit its police force. McAdams parked near City Hall, gripping the evidence case like it was a lifeline. Once this goes public, everything changes, he said quietly. Careers will end. Maybe even mine. Clara placed her hand over his. But Luke's name will finally be cleared. He nodded, emotion flickering in his eyes. That's what matters. They stepped out together, Ranger following close behind. Each step toward the courthouse felt heavier, slower, as if the ghosts of everyone who died for this truth walked beside them. Inside, McAdams handed the case to a federal investigator from Topeka, one of the few men he still trusted. As the agent signed the evidence log, McAdams finally exhaled. "It's done," he said. Clara smiled weakly. "No, it's starting." Ranger pressed his head against her leg, eyes soft, content. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to breathe, deeply, freely, without fear. Outside, the first reports began to break. Whistleblower evidence exposes corruption within Wichita PD. Major arrests expected. Luke Mercer's name appeared again, not as a casualty, but as a hero. That night, as the city lights shimmered against the Arkansas River, McAdams stood on the riverbank with Clara and Ranger. The air smelled of rain and redemption. "Luke was right," McAdams said quietly. "Truth doesn't die. It just waits." Clara looked at the badge still in her hand, glinting in the moonlight. "He left a trail for us to follow." Ranger barked once, the sound echoing across the water. Proud, certain, final. And in that moment, Clara felt it. The peace Luke had fought for, the justice Daniel had died for, the closure she thought she'd never find. She turned to McAdams, voice soft but steady. "We did it." He smiled faintly. "No, Clara, he did." The storm that rolled through Wichita that night wasn't just weather. It was cleansing. The rain came in sheets, washing the streets, softening the neon glow of the police precinct sign. For the first time in months, the city felt lighter. News anchors spoke in quick, excited bursts. Several members of the Wichita Police Department have been suspended pending investigation. Sources confirm that the evidence uncovered connects to multiple unsolved cases. But behind every breaking headline, there was silence, the quiet, aching silence that follows the truth finally being heard. Detective Evan McAdams sat at his desk, the hum of the rain against the window his only company. The walls of his office were stripped bare now, boxes half filled with files, plaques removed, the badge that once meant everything lying motionless beside a folded resignation letter. Ranger lay near his feet, chin on his paws, watching him. "It's over," McAdams said softly. "We did it, boy." Ranger thumped his tail once, but didn't move. His eyes, deep and old, seemed to understand what over really meant, that justice came with a cost, and McAdams had paid it in full. A knock came at the door. Clara stepped in, her hair still damp from the rain. She wore a plain jacket, Luke's badge pinned discreetly inside. "They accepted it?" she asked. McAdams nodded. "Effective tomorrow. They said I could stay, internal review, commendations, all that nonsense. But I can't keep doing this. Not after everything." Clara moved closer, folding her arms. "You exposed half the department. You changed how this city looks at its cops. You don't walk away after that." He met her eyes. "Luke didn't die so we could patch up a broken system. He died so we could tear it down and rebuild it right. That starts with someone new, someone cleaner." Silence lingered between them. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the framed photo of Luke that Clara had set on the shelf weeks ago. His smile frozen in that easy, confident way only good men carried. "You're still carrying his badge," McAdams said quietly. She looked down at it, brushing her thumb over the metal. "I'm not ready to let go." He smiled faintly. "Neither is Ranger." At the sound of his name, the dog lifted his head, ears perking. Clara knelt beside him, scratching the spot just behind his neck that Luke used to. "He still looks for him," she whispered. "Every morning he stares at the doorway like he's waiting." McAdams sighed. "Maybe we all are." Later that night, they drove out to the outskirts of the city, to the open field where Luke's hidden case had been buried. The rain had stopped, leaving the grass slick and the air heavy with petrichor. The windmill loomed above them, its slow-turning creak a metronome for their thoughts. Ranger bounded ahead, tail wagging as he reached the old patch of dirt. He circled once, sniffed, then sat down, perfectly still facing east. Clara stopped a few feet away, her breath catching. He remembers. McAdams stood beside her, hands in his coat pockets. He always will. They stood in silence for a long time. No words could fill the space Luke left behind. The wind whispered through the tall grass, the kind of whisper that felt like a voice carried from somewhere unseen. Finally, Clara reached into her jacket and pulled out Luke's badge. She held it in her hands for a long moment, rainwater dripping from her fingers. "This belongs here," she said. McAdams nodded. He'd like that. She knelt and pressed the badge into the earth, right where they'd dug before. Ranger lowered his head, as if bowing. Clara whispered something, words too soft for McAdams to hear. Maybe a prayer. Maybe just a goodbye. When she stood, her eyes were wet, but not from the rain. They drove back in silence, the city lights reappearing on the horizon like a distant promise. McAdams pulled up outside Clara's apartment, engine idling. "You sure you'll be all right?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "I've got Ranger, and I've got work to do. People are already reaching out, reporters, advocacy groups. They want to help." "That's good," he said. "You could help too." He looked away, out the windshield. "I think I've done my part." She studied him, recognizing the fatigue behind the words. He wasn't just tired. He was haunted. Every truth uncovered came with a ghost attached, and McAdams had collected too many. "Evan," she said softly, "you didn't just clear Luke's name. You gave him back his voice." He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time allowed himself to believe it. "Thank you," he murmured. She opened the door, rain starting again in a slow drizzle. Before stepping out, she leaned down and kissed Ranger on the head. "Take care of him, okay?" The dog gave a quiet whine, eyes following her until she disappeared into the stairwell. Weeks passed. The investigation spread like wildfire. Names were revealed, officers, judges, even politicians. The story reached national headlines. Wichita PD scandal exposes deep corruption. Whistleblower's death sparks reform. Clara became the public voice of the truth. Her interviews were calm, unflinching, full of the same grace that had carried her through grief. She refused to let Luke's story be reduced to a tragedy. She made it a movement. And McAdams? He disappeared from the public eye. Rumor said he moved to Colorado, working small security jobs, avoiding cameras. The badge that once hung proudly on his chest now sat in a drawer somewhere, collecting dust. But sometimes, on long mountain drives, he'd find a quiet hilltop, park the car, and let Ranger run free, tail whipping through tall grass, the echo of distant barks fading into wind. On those days, McAdams would close his eyes and remember the sound of Luke's voice on that recording. "If they come for me, they'll come for Daniel next. But if you're watching this, it means I wasn't wrong." He'd smile then, a sad, quiet smile. "You weren't wrong," he'd whisper to the wind. "You were just ahead of your time." One late autumn evening, McAdams returned to Wichita for the first time. He didn't tell anyone. He parked near the riverbank where everything had ended and begun and walked a familiar trail. The skyline shimmered in the water's reflection, the city rebuilt but still scarred. At the Memorial Plaza near the courthouse, a new plaque had been installed, in memory of Officer Luke Mercer, for his courage, his truth, and his sacrifice. Justice doesn't die. It just waits. Beneath it, someone had left a single police badge, tarnished from the rain. McAdams felt Ranger brush against his leg. The dog sat, ears perked, eyes fixed on the plaque. Yeah, McAdams murmured. He'd like this. Ranger let out one low bark. Not mournful, not sad. Just acknowledgement. The detective knelt, resting a hand on the dog's back. You did good, buddy. He stayed there for a long time, the sound of the river and distant traffic filling the silence. When he finally stood, the wind carried a faint whisper through the trees, something that sounded almost like a voice. Maybe it was imagination. Maybe not. McAdams looked up at the sky, a faint smile on his lips. Good night, Luke. He turned, walking back toward the car, Ranger trotting faithfully beside him. Behind them, the plaque gleamed under a flickering streetlight, a beacon of hard-won truth in a city learning to heal. And somewhere in that quiet, Clara Jensen, now speaking to a crowd miles away, told Luke's story again, her voice steady, her eyes bright. Because some stories aren't meant to fade. They're meant to echo